Last spring, Wren sent me their 110mm fat bike fork. I had ridden a RockShox Bluto for years and sampled the Mastodon a few times, but I wanted to try out this underdog of the fat bike suspension world. It's now been one whole trip around the sun with this upside down fork, and that means it's time for a long-term review. If you've done any investigation into fat bike suspension forks, the general consensus seems to be that the Mastodon is heavy, but it gives you top tier performance. The Bluto is relatively light, but kind of like riding a wet noodle. And the Wren looks really cool, but it's unreliable. While I agree with some of these points, I have to disagree when it comes to the Wren. However, I'm going to start off with the cons or downsides to this fork, just for the sake of context and transparency. In the year since I got the Wren, I've put hundreds of miles on buff single track, rock rolls, and all kinds of snow. In all that time, I've had two issues, if you want to call them that. First, the fork seems to have a noticeable clunk if the rebound is set too fast. This clunk is more noise than feel, and to be honest, many people won't even notice it. I also haven't noticed any performance issues from it, and it doesn't happen as often as I first expected it to. I've come to accept it as just a quirk of the fork and its design, and while some people might have a hard time with that, it doesn't really bother me. The second one is a little more serious, as last fall I noticed the fork was acting weirdly and quickly realized I had blown the damper. I'm not going to downplay this, as it's a real issue and something I've never had an issue with in years of Bluto use. I've also gotten a little chunkier over the last year. That's what having a brand new baby does to you. And that means I'm really putting components to the test. I've spoken with many people out there with more than 1,000 trouble-free miles on their fork, so I chalk this up to bad luck and my weight. Despite the blown damper being a real bummer, this is actually where this fork and Wren sports in general really start to shine. When I noticed that blown damper, I stopped on the side of the trail, pulled up Wren's website, and gave them a call. Very quickly, I was talking to a real person who helped diagnose the problem without ever being put on hold or being transferred or anything like that. Before I even made it back to my car, I had received an email confirmation for a new damper under warranty. That's the kind of customer service that really wins people over and shows you what a company is all about. Once the damper came, and with only a couple of sockets and Allen wrenches, the damper was easily swapped out by following step-by-step instructions. As someone who values being able to work on things without specialty tools, this is a major plus. Now let's talk about ride quality. For years, I used that Bluto, and while it definitely provided some benefits on jumps and rocky trails, it always just kind of felt okay. It wasn't until the first time I hit a rock garden on the Wren, though, that I realized just how terrible the Bluto and how great the Wren was. Like any fork, it takes some adjustment at first to find the right pressure and settings, but once you dial it in, the small bump absorption is out of this world. It doesn't just lessen the impact over small roots and rocks, it almost makes that bump disappear completely. This is supposed to be a major benefit of the inverted design, with the lighter weight stanchions on the bottom being more sensitive to small bumps. So if you're wanting a suspension fork that will eliminate that trail chatter and give you a really supple ride, this fork will do the trick. On the rowdier side of things, I tend to be more of a tires on the ground type rider, but I do enjoy my share of drops and even hitting some jumps now and then. The Wren has done a great job in these scenarios. It preloads predictably, absorbs the impact well, and doesn't feel noodly or flexy. Its 36mm stanchions are the largest of all the fat bike forks on the market, and the uppers are even more massive at 43mm, and this size is noticeable in how it rides. Something about those large upper stanchions just makes the fork feel like it's almost an extension of the frame itself. I've spoken with a couple of people who felt like there was some unwanted movement back and forth on steep descents, but I've never experienced it on steep stuff, even at my weight. Because this is a fat bike fork, it needs to perform well in cold temperatures. Many bike components are designed and tested to perform best at the temps most people ride in, which basically means above freezing. That means components with fluid, like brakes, shocks, and forks, can start to act a little funny or even fail when it's too cold out. This winter has been especially harsh here in Montana, even hitting minus 40 degrees at one point. And while I didn't ride that day, I have used it in temps below zero and haven't noticed any decrease in ride quality or performance. Cold also means there's usually a good amount of snow on the ground, so it's not like I'm hitting big jumps or anything, but I do encounter my fair share of icy post holes. I've noticed the fork soaks up those bumps just like it does rocks in the summer and doesn't seem to be affected by the freezing temperatures. There are a few other things out there that people complain about with the Wren, such as the axle setup not being as intuitive and easy to use as other forks, but I think that's just being nitpicky. Besides that damper problem, which again I attribute to a combination of bad luck and my weight, I've really enjoyed this fork. It performs well, it can clear every size of tire I could ever want, it's easy to set up and tune, and I personally think it looks really cool. I will admit it's not on my bike right now, but that's only because I'm wanting to test out the Manitou Mastodon on a long-term basis. It's been a couple months with that fork, but I'm still feeling like I'll put the Wren back on when I'm finished. Now is the part where I want to hear from you down in the comments. If you've ridden a Wren, what has your experience been? And how does it compare to the other forks I've mentioned? Some of you might just be thinking, just get a Mastodon and get it over with, that way you don't waste your money. The problem is, a Mastodon is really expensive, and that's one thing that made the Wren more attractive to me. If this has been helpful, please like and share this video, and consider leaving a donation through the Super Thanks feature. The majority of the bikes and components I get in for review are paid for out of my pocket, so donations really help me when it comes to getting more in to put to the test and review. I want to say thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.